Hello, welcome to Colonial Outcast. I'm Mark Wayne with host Greg Stoker. Today I'm going to do the intro because I like making Greg panic, wondering what kind of intro I'm going to dish out. The current look of terror that you see on Greg's face right now is very reflective of how many of us feel about the current state of affairs. Don't worry, Greg. Today we're talking about animal health care and how it relates to genocide and imperialism. But before we get into that, Greg has a very urgent call to action for the listeners in New York City. Greg, go ahead and do what you got to do.
Okay, well, thanks, Mark. I totally am nervous. It's not like I'm a control freak or whatever. But anyways, call to action. If you're in New York, I'm in New York like 5 times a year. But this one's a big one, and nobody thought to check my mic settings, so I think my audio should be sounding better. Is it sounding better than it was?
It's always been sounding good.
Okay, well, screw it. Anyways, guys, if you're in New York City, last year the CUNY students took a stand, and now 8 people who supported the encampments are facing felony charges for their activism. Call to action coming shortly.
Facing and how long?
I'm currently facing felony charges.
Attempted assault, burglary to the 3rd degree.
Potentially 5 to 7 years. Spiritually speaking, I do spend a lot of time thinking, well, what am I going to do if and when I go to prison?
Well, more than 200 people were arrested in New York between Columbia University and the City College of New York, which is a CUNY college there.
Alrighty. So,
When I was arrested, I didn't feel like I had done anything wrong because I believe in what we were doing.
Yeah, the Palestinian resistance wanted to put more pressure on the Zionist entity and its American ally. Every public and private college in the U.S. has money in Israel.
The administration, both the CCNY administration and the CUNY administration, have refused to negotiate with us and instead chose to send in armed policemen to brutalize and violently arrest our protesters.
do you regret your involvement in the CUNY encampment?
No, absolutely not. Never.
Absolutely not. I have zero regrets. I would do everything the same with the same people.
I do not regret my role in the CUNY encampment.
I don't regret being involved in the CUNY encampment. I would do it again in a heartbeat.
And, the government always is very threatened throughout history by student-led movements, so they're doing a crackdown. So if you have Valentine's plans during the day of on Friday, February 14th, in like about 48 hours, you're going to have to postpone them. These charges are meant to intimidate and silence student movements, but they're not going to back down. Where? Columbus Park, New York City. When? 8:30 a.m. And then after some time, you're going to move to the courthouse. And if you're in the Palestine movement, Stop Cop City movement, or the multifarious environmentalist movements, you are expected to show up if you can afford to miss work or you're not missing work. So, that's just the call to action. And I think today we're going to be focusing on the hypocrisy of certain institutions like schools. And before we get into the veterinary world, I just want to say that Columbia University always celebrates its previous student encampments for the Vietnam War, for South African apartheid, for anti-fracking. But it's just like liberals. They always oppose every war except the current one. Yeah, and every genocide except the one that's happening right now. So, anyways, Mark, what are we doing today?
Well, in keeping with tradition of the Vietnam anti-war movement, I'm very proud of those Columbia students for doing what they did. You would think we would catch up with history and just be like, oh, hey, that's great. That's exactly how we put pressure on the government for ending the war. You would think that we would be more supportive of it. But it just adds to the rest of the chaos that we've seen this year. This new year has already gone by for so many of us in a dismal tornado as we watch the blue fascist regime pass the torch to the red flavored one, a fragile ceasefire in Gaza that is broken daily by Israel, ICE terrorizing communities across the nation, fires ripping through Southern California, and the light speed rollouts of unhinged executive orders that do absolutely nothing for the working class. In this chaos, it's often hard to think about the hard work that is being done by the heroes in this movement who have been fighting this past year to not only stop the genocide that we have been watching unfold, but also holding accountable those, specifically institutions who stayed either silent or complicit. Not least of these are veterinarians. When we in the West think of humane treatment of animals, we can often fall into this centrist trap that human beings outside of the empire's border don't have lives, humanity, or the same love for animals that we do. But this is very important aspect. This very important aspect of human nature that's seldom talked about in relation to Palestinians is not lost on a very compassionate and ever-growing army of animal healthcare workers who care about the animals who have been killed and suffered through this horrific failure of humanity. Chief among these vets is Dr. Kamal, who's joining us today to talk about this underappreciated subject. So we're going to add her on up here. So Dr. Kamal,
Hey,
from veteran to veterinarian, we would like to welcome you to this very crude podcast. So
thanks for having me.
yeah. So Dr. Kamal, besides being a very compassionate veterinarian, you are also the founder of Animal Healthcare Workers Against Genocide, which you started as a response to the genocide, doing what you can in your own specific capacity as a veterinarian to cry out to the leaders and to the public about what's going on. You lobbied with Code Pink on Capitol Hill. Going back, though, to the deafening silence from institutions, one of the things I've become more privy to in getting to know you this past year was your frustration with so many organizations who suddenly developed this inexplicable blind spot for a genocide. More specifically, medical associations, who I guess just either didn't get the memo that a very unhealthy mass murder campaign was going on against men, women, and children and animals, or they're so grossly entwined in a colonial pyramid scheme that just goes against the very nature of what their stated missions are. So I would kind of like want to dive into that with you a little later, but first I would just like for you to kind of talk about what inspired you to start Animal Healthcare Workers Against Genocide, what you've been up to this past year, and how Americans should become more who have pets and care about animals should care about what's happening in Gaza and against the Palestinians, also in the West Bank.
Okay, sure. Thanks so much, Mark. That was a lot that you packed into that intro. I think you should do more intros.
Thank you,
But
Mar.
moving on, but moving on, I just want to say I will explain a little bit about myself, but I want it to be more about the people listening, because I want people listening to understand that if you care about animals, which I think probably most of your listeners do, but even if you don't, and you care about ending genocide, this is extremely relevant because the veterinary profession is tied into literally everything that helps you survive. And so I'll start with answering the first part of your question, which is what inspired me to start it. And it was basically when I first started, when we all first started seeing these awful videos coming out, one of the first activist that really inspired me was Medea Benjamin. And I saw her going out and to Capitol Hill and like bird dogging these senators and reps. And one day I saw this video where she was like, anyone can come join me. And so I did. I went down and started joining Code Pink. And once I started mentioning that I was a veterinarian, people were like, I was the only veterinarian that was usually there, which felt really lonely. And I didn't really know anyone else in my profession who was active on it. In fact, in the beginning, we could talk about that later, what I went through when I started speaking up about it, just from the antagonism from the veterinary community in general. But anyway, so I started going around with Code Pink and Medea, and then I started meeting the physicians from Doctors Against Genocide, who they started Doctors Against Genocide in response to what happened in October 2023. And then they were very supportive of me starting Animal Healthcare Workers Against Genocide. So then with their support, I started that. I found a number of people who were willing to, very passionate about co-founding it with me. So I have 5 co-founders that are all veterinarians. Mm-hmm. And we've been going ever since, and still have a lot of support from both of those orgs.
What's your experience been like on Capitol Hill when you've been approaching these senators and congressmen?
It's very frustrating because there's a lot of reasons it's frustrating, but Mainly, even when we go to the friendly offices and we like go there with our fact sheets and printouts and reports, and we talk about things from a medical perspective. I talk about things from a veterinary perspective. Usually I'll go with members of Doctors Against Genocide. They'll be talking about the human medical aspect. But even when we go to friendly offices, they're like, you guys are preaching to the choir. Like, what do you think we should do? What do you think we should do? What is your recommendation for what we should do? And we're like, we want you to stop this. Like, we want you to do everything you could do to stop this. Like, we're not an elected official and you are. But they say things like, well, we're sure that you've seen, you know, our office's statements, like we support a ceasefire and all these things.
Oh, that's nice.
Right.
That's so good that they do that. But of course, Hakeem Jeffries, one of the most influential members of the Democratic legislature, said that, you know, there's nothing we can do. They own the executive, they own the White House, they own the legislature, they own the Supreme Court. Like, what leverage do we have? It's like, okay, well, you know, even friendly offices have that standpoint, you know, which is kind of, in my opinion, like a brush off as well. It's like, yeah, we agree with you. What can be done? You know, rules.
It's a total brush off. It's a total brush off. It's very frustrating because it's basically a way of continuing to be complicit while trying to have like the facade of not being complicit.
Oh my God, that is the Democratic Party in general, though. So I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole, I promise. But please continue.
Yeah, no. So that's been my experience on Capitol Hill. Like, we have a lot of, and like as time has gone on, some offices have gotten friendlier and friendlier. I mean, I won't specifically name this office, but I went to an extremely friendly office, and they told me that the person, well, it's going to be obvious who it is when I say this, but I don't think they'll mind, so I'll just say it. So in that office, I met with someone who had worked with Jesse Jackson for years and years. And he said that in all the times, like even going out to the Arab region and being involved in a lot of peace talks and things like that, he had never heard the angle that we brought as animal healthcare workers, and he felt like it was really important. And he said that what you guys have to do is get more people. Like, you have to come back here with more people, like coming in and meeting with us behind closed doors. Like, we're already on your side. You need more people.
I remember like good.
Yeah, it's just interesting. Like, more people. We I grew up hearing like amongst like more animal rights activists, or like people that are sympathetic to the plight of like animals in general, which I am as well, like say things like, I'm not so interested in like humans. I care more about animals. And then when you see, this is just kind of like an apropos thought, you know, IDF snipers just shooting donkeys for no reason. Thought that might activate something, but yeah, it's kind of like this black hole that exists around this one issue and around animal rights or animal safety or anything in the black hole that is Gaza.
And we have, for example, Cory Booker, who is a senator that we actually have a meeting with his office next week on February 19th, which actually anyone can join us. The link is in our link tree. If you guys want to join us in Capitol Hill, February 19th, please do.
We'll be posting that in the description of the episode.
And so anyway, we have a meeting with his office next week, and Cory Booker is vegan, and he literally is like very Zionist and literally hosted Galant in his office recently.
Okay,
like
wait,
the Israeli defense minister. The Israeli defense minister is hosted in this office. And I was with Capitol Hill. I was with Medea on Capitol Hill a few weeks ago, and she asked me, like, what do you think about that? And I was like, I don't think the animals are with that. Like, I don't think that makes any sense. Like, for you to be like, I love animals so much that I will never ever eat one, yet let me help perpetrate a genocide that is destroying humans, animals, and the environment such that none of us will survive.
That is the essence of liberalism, though. I mean, you drink oat milk Starbucks while, you know, endorsing a genocide. That's the quintessential picture of liberalism with that. But I mean, you and I remember we were having a discussion, and I was somewhat of a very cynical when it came to action on Capitol Hill. And I was trying to understand people like you who go to Capitol Hill and put this effort into these brick walls of human beings that literally have no interest in doing anything for the people or stopping a genocide. They're just giving lip service. But I was like, why do you guys do this to yourself? But then you told me something that made a lot of sense. You told me that the reason why you do it is to set a historical record, so that at least for the very least, you can say that you showed them the facts, you lobbied them, you educated them, and they still would not give in. So at least history will reflect that we did push our leaders to do this. So they can never accuse us of saying, well, you guys didn't do enough politically. You didn't write your senator. You guys actually bird dogged them and harassed them daily going to their offices. So that changed my perspective on the people like yourself who actually put that effort into talking to the politicians.
And you know, Mark, it actually goes even deeper than that too, because there are other reasons. So first, it's the documentation. It's like we gave them literal like Human Rights Watch reports and OSHA notes and everything printed out, like explained in detail what's happening with the illegal chemical weapons, what they're doing to the environment, the carbon emissions of the military industrial complex, like how it's literally killing all of us. We explain every angle in extreme detail. So that's a document. But there are other things too. Like one, for example, is that like we can't allow them to do this in peace. Like we can't just allow them to be like, oh, la-di-da, like we ignored them long enough, so now they'll all go away and we can do this in peace. That's very important. Another important thing is, like, as we learned from activists like Medea, if we get video record of their resistance to our efforts, that's really important in terms of educating the general public of what in the world are we being represented by. Like, we definitely need to change. Like, that shows the corruption from the inside out. That's really important. And that's another aspect of it. So we have to be able to, and then another aspect too is that the people playing these roles, like we have in the veterinary industry and also in the human healthcare industry, but as in the veterinary industry, we have like a specific role where like we have like some people, and I know in recent years it's changed a little bit, but some people see us as like very empathetic, credible, intelligent people. And so if we go from a scientific medical perspective, that's a different piece of the puzzle. Some people we can't do like disruptive actions and get arrested and things. Like, if those charges stick, like we may not even be able to volunteer at an animal hospital again. Do you know what I mean? Like volunteer at an animal shelter or something. So playing this role is a way of taking part. I think we all have a different role to play. So that's another part of it.
Yeah. Have you seen reaction from the public? Like you're on Instagram and you make these very, very great posts and videos trying to educate people. It's, starting back when the election period and the genocide. Have you seen a reaction from everyday Americans as a result of you educating them and you reaching out to people as far as using that angle of animal healthcare?
Yes, definitely. So initially when I first started talking about it, it was like a mass exodus from my account first, and now it's gotten very positive. But initially I had, I just had a few hundred followers on my account, and so I knew like every person personally on my account. And these were people who were like my previous classmates, my colleagues, people who I had grown up with, mentors, and people unfollowed me in droves, and people harassed me in droves. People called me the T word, like you're just as effing bad as they are. Do your homework, all this stuff. And memorably, I have been very involved in the past in anti-cruelty efforts, like literally working to like treat dogs that have been rescued from dogfighting rings and just abused animals, like countless animals that I've helped provide healthcare to. And the two people who trained me in anti-cruelty medicine and literally taught me how to do like forensic necropsies and take photographs to document and like write reports that go to help put animal abusers away. They unfollowed me after I started posting about Palestine.
And
that's a universal thing. It's just I was also thinking about like the scholasticide in Gaza, the destruction of every school, and all of these NGOs about like stopping the book ban, stopping the fighting against the end of the transmission of like knowledge and education. All these organizations meant to like raise literacy rates in disadvantaged areas of the United States. Silent.
Yeah. Well, that takes us into this topic of the deafening silence. So, like, what this implies is that institutions are so heavily co-opted by Zionist interests that they can't even speak out on the very subject that constitutes their existence. So this kind of opens up kind of like the deeper question of this episode that I'm presenting, is that will this pyramid of the ruling class be able to maintain control of the narrative surrounding this genocide, or rather the denial of it, or will the minority who stood up to cry out the truth, like Dr. Kamal, eventually become the leaders of the narrative in the population, as is often the pattern in history? So as we've seen in history, it was the few who were originally crying out that eventually wound up leading culture around it. Whereas the monolith of empire, they would control the narrative for only so long. And then eventually 20 years down the line, the underdog narrative would take over. But I'm kind of hypothesizing that this is going to be a lot shorter time frame of that happening, of the underdog narrative taking over, because of the internet, because of simply all of the media that's going to be coming out. I don't know if that's going to be the case. It's like a constant battle. So Mar, you're one of those few that's pushing that narrative in institutions like in fields like the animal healthcare field, that you will eventually see other animal healthcare workers get on the bandwagon. But you're getting so much pushback, and I kind of want to go into the silence that we're seeing in these institutions and what your peers have experienced.
And there are a lot of reasons that so my peers, I know a lot of my peers care, and they're afraid to speak out. They're afraid of all sorts of consequences, as we've seen happen to healthcare workers across the board. And therefore, we need to focus our efforts on the leadership. Like the leadership organizations are all completely silent. And by the way, I don't know one public figure veterinarian who is speaking out, because, I've talked to people about, like, there are public figure physicians who are speaking out, but I don't know any veterinarians who are. It's really concerning. Actually, what I had wanted to tell you guys was that I was wondering if there's multiple reasons why veterinarians, why animal healthcare workers, and why people who love or care about animals should care about genocide. And I wanted to ask you guys what you think those are. And I want to ask, I just want to step back real quick before I ask you what those are. I want to ask your listeners that too. Like, why do you think we should care? If we care about animals, why do you think we should care about stopping genocide?
Greg, you go.
I don't know, like basic human empathy, I guess.
Okay. Yep, that's one.
That's definitely one. But like all these systems are connected.
Yes.
Like veterinary healthcare, human healthcare, connected. A lot of the same health companies also provide that are complicit, like big pharma, with investing and funding certain projects in Israel, also are in the veterinary world as well. That's why we'll never run out of topics here on Colonial Outcast, because literally it's all connected in the same system.
We got plenty of fodder on this left to go.
So that's my answer.
Yeah. That's great. And then there's one more part to it, which is that, Mark, do you want to go? Do you want to say what the other?
I mean, I second that so heavily, what Greg just said, because this interconnectedness is not just the subject matter of humanity. It's also the corruption. We're seeing this spider's web of corruption that infiltrates every single institution that is an official institution, just basically speaking. So the reason why it's important that we kind of see this silence is so that we can finally see these institutions for what they were this whole time. It's better that we kind of find out now than years later, when it gets, like it's good that the mask is ripped off the beast, is basically what I'm saying. So these medical institutions, AMA, I don't want to name names, but
I mean, they're for profit, and if being silent about this issue is going to, not infringe on their bottom line. They're going to take that course. But like, what's the third? What's the other reason?
So
go ahead.
I got one more answer. So besides empathy, of course, it also sets a terrible precedent. Like, if we're going to ignore a mass slaughter of people and animals, then what precedent does that set for the future? You can't just ignore a huge elephant in the room of mass slaughter and then expect to just move on with humanity and not expect that to happen again and say, I don't know, maybe a city in the United States, God forbid, or something like that.
Dude, it could never happen here.
It could never happen here. Never. It would never do that.
Yeah, our government would never do that to us. Just every other person on the planet.
Yeah, we're special.
And our government is currently not doing that to us.
Yeah, not yet.
No.
So, what was the third answer? Did Mark get it, or are we still missing one?
No. The other one that a lot of people don't know is that as animal healthcare workers, the veterinary oath and the veterinary nursing oath both include a promise to protect public health and to operate with a code of like ethics and dignity and to contribute to society and humanity. So if we don't speak up when there's a literal genocide being funded by our country, we are in direct violation of our oath.
Yeah.
That's an interesting that a public health is a component of that.
Because, we're going to get into that, Greg, because people don't realize what a big role veterinarians play in their lives. Mm-hmm. And public health is a big one. But, okay, so let me ask you a question. So, Greg, the concept that you discussed where everything is all connected, that is something called One Health.
Okay.
So can we play the video, Mark, that defines what One Health is? I have like an educational, informative, very dry video about One Health. The definition of it is very short.
Very good. It's not dry at all. It's very good. Here we go.
It's very, very short.
There's good reason to be silent on. Sometimes there's good reason to be silent on genocide. In the veterinary field, we proudly believe in a concept called One Health, which means we're completely exempt from caring. One Health means human, animal, and environmental health is all connected. Unless US-made weapons and interests are murdering people who aren't white, then the humans, animals, and environments affected aren't part of One Health, or our concern.
One Health helps everyone to see the importance of the veterinary profession and caring for animals. But when genocidal regimes are intentionally poisoning and shooting farm animals from Congo to Palestine, that's not something we need to know about or talk about.
One Health is about working together. It involves everyone all over the globe. But when Israel completely destroys the majority of Gaza's healthcare system, creating rubble from hospitals and taking hundreds of Palestinian healthcare workers hostage, we can stay completely silent about that.
One Health is about understanding how our challenging environment can affect both human and animals. But when our country is supplying 70% of the weapons used to genocide an entire population, the military-industrial complex is the biggest driver of climate change, that has nothing to do with One Health.
One Health is a unified approach. It means talking about preventives like vaccines. But when I make money vaccinating some of the most privileged animals on the planet, and my tax dollars supply weapons to genociders, that has nothing to do with One Health. I can believe in One Health without supporting human rights for everyone. He's gone.
One Health is an integrated approach to solving problems like environmental impacts on health. But when it comes to the crushing systems of capitalism, colonialism, imperialism, corporate greed, racism, bigotry, war, and genocide, there's really no need for the US veterinarians to talk about that because, well, most of us really aren't affected in ways we recognize.
One Health.
One Health.
One Health.
It's something you can just say.
If you disagree with this video, join Animal Healthcare Workers Against Genocide, the crazy people who think we should actually give a shit. Check the official link tree to take action today.
Love that video.
Okay, so now that you guys know what One Health is, we have to talk about how One Health is connected to the military-industrial complex and the genocide. But the reason I wanted to show that video is because, and the reason we made that video is because in the veterinary community, we are very proud of the concept of One Health because it shows that like, hey guys, we're so relevant. Look at this huge role that we play in global health. And One Health is not only something that we believe as veterinarians though, and as veterinary nurses, it's all throughout human healthcare too. WHO has initiatives on this, CDC, NIH, there are global conferences on this every year. People all over the world talk about and celebrate One Health and how important it is for us to recognize that human, animal, and environmental health is all interconnected. So why is it so hard to see these areas where it's connected when it comes to war and genocide? Because as Greg, as you said, there's profit to be lost if we see that.
Exactly. And, you know, you're out there pounding the pavement around Capitol Hill, creating a corpus of records about engaging with our elected representatives. A lot of people can't do that. So when we're talking about like the war machine and stuff, one concept that I definitely want to learn more about is how the veterinary industry, which is under the umbrella of what we call big pharma and some other sectors as well, is connected to problematic business interests and the military, industrial, media, and academic complex.
So yeah, I think that's smart. That makes sense. I think we should definitely go into that. Okay, so we went over the first question, so we all know the answers to that now.
Yeah.
Before we go into, do you guys want to talk about the stuff about human health at all? Because under One Health is human and animal and environmental, or you just want to skip to animal environmental? Because the reason I wanted to talk about human, just briefly, like I know you guys don't want to focus on that. Okay, so I'm going to ask this question to Greg, since you said in the beginning, you were like, let's really focus on animal and environmental because everybody knows how the human healthcare sectors have been affected, right?
Well, I think I'm not trying to preempt your question, but I think they're definitely all connected, especially when, you know, we defund a bunch of like federal grants to medical agencies and then withdraw from the World Health Organization on the eve when the bird flu is about to like transition to humans. Yeah, so that's, I think, the clearest demonstration of like how One Health is applicable as well.
Yeah, that's really good. And I wasn't even going to bring up any of those points. So that's exactly what I'm talking about. So you kind of covered a lot of the different points of how human health care has been affected. So obviously we all know in terms of this specific genocide, the destruction of Gaza's healthcare system. Mm-hmm. We all know that. And so also, as you know, you just talked about some of the actions that our government is taking. We also know that as we send billions of dollars to Israel, we don't have adequate health care. Like we are sent like that. So that's another way that everything's all tied together. And then the other two aspects are, of course, the like Mark was talking about, the setting the precedent that if healthcare workers are in a certain part of the world and they're abducted, tortured, and murdered, that's fine. As long as we can fund that as long as it's in a certain part of the world. That's also part of One Health. And then the other part is the people who have been literally targeted and persecuted here. So one thing I really want to do real quick before we move on to the animal and environmental parts is I want to talk about two quick things that people may literally not know about in your audience. One is I want to read some excerpts from a Human Rights Watch article and from an Amnesty International article about abducted and tortured and murdered healthcare workers that were abducted and murdered by Israel. So from this Human Rights Watch article, it says, released doctors, nurses, and paramedics described to Human Rights Watch their mistreatment in Israeli custody, including humiliation, beatings, forced stress positions, prolonged cuffing and blindfolding. They also reported torture, including rape and sexual abuse by Israeli forces, denial of medical care, and poor detention conditions. Okay, Ayad Abed, 50, a surgeon at the Indonesian hospital who was detained during a coordinated evac of the hospital in November, said, every minute we were beaten. I mean, all over the body, on sensitive areas, between the legs, the chest, and the back. We were kicked all over the body and the face. They used the front of their boots, which had a metal tip, then their weapons. They had lighters. One soldier tried to burn me, but burned the person next to me. I told them I'm a doctor, but they didn't care. A paramedic, Walid Khalili, 36, said that when soldiers removed his blindfold at the Sadeh Teman facility, he saw he was in a large building, quote, like a warehouse, with chains hanging from the ceiling. Dozens of detainees in diapers were suspended from the ceiling with chains attached to square metal handcuffs. The personnel at the facility then suspended him. His feet were not touching the ground. They dressed him in a garment and a headband that were attached to wires and shocked him with electricity. Now going on to the Amnesty International article. This is from, well, there's one woman here who is not a healthcare worker. I'm still going to read her account because it's obviously relevant, even though we're talking about healthcare workers. She said, "I was terrified and scared for my kids all the time." She repeated requests for information about her children and was ignored by prison guards whom she overheard laughing and mocking her. She told Amnesty that after 3 weeks at Damon prison, she was told she would be released. She was handcuffed, blindfolded, and had her feet shackled and was taken to another location. Instead of being released, she was violently strip searched by guards who used a huge knife to rip off her clothes. And last excerpt, all of the healthcare workers described horrific conditions in detention. Abed, the surgeon I was talking about earlier, said the food was, quote, horrible and inadequate, and that he lost 22 kilograms during a month and a half in detention. The bathrooms were, quote, not even fit for animals. The mattresses and blankets were thin, and the cold nights were, quote, unbearable. They gave us a bag for garbage. We used to fill it with water and drink from it later. It smelled horrible, but we had no choice. And these are the same. So now Israel has murdered over 1,000 healthcare workers and has abducted hundreds from all these hospitals that we're constantly seeing in these videos. And they're taken to these, quote, detention centers, quote, prisons, where they're literally tortured in ways that we could not imagine. I just wanted to read that because I think there are a lot of people who don't know those specific details.
I love the way you articulated all of that. It's a great soundbite that we can put out there as just if Americans who have absolutely no idea what's going on and they say, oh, it's too complicated. It's just so complicated. It has a lot of moving parts and it's nuanced. It's like, there you go. There's your simplicity right there.
Unfortunately, let's be realistic. Like everybody who's going to watch or listen to this already knows the details, and everyone who it doesn't or is still on board, like that's not gonna bring them on side.
I'm actually not even saying about bringing them on side, Greg. I didn't know some of these details. I wanted other people who were already on our side to be armed with these details because it doesn't matter what is going to bring people on side or not. We still need to know these details of what's happening. And every time I learn more details that I don't know, I realize that what I do know is the tip of the iceberg, and we have to keep chipping away at the iceberg.
Right. And like, I think one of the things too is not even what's happening, what has happened in the detention centers. It's what's happened in blackout zones in Gaza with these Israeli infantry platoons clearing through houses and stuff. So we'll learn about that in due time, probably years from now. But so one of the reasons of bringing this to the attention, are we still on One Health? Or where are we going with this?
This whole thing is One Health. Yeah.
Just real quick. So you're talking about it spreading this information to people who are outside of the algorithm bubble, the pro-Palestinian algorithm bubble. You and I constantly talk about how we made a video about this, about talking to people offline, right? Mm-hmm. Can you do like just a quick 30-minute call to action of what people can do to take the information that you just very beautifully articulated to people in their everyday life, armed with that information?
Yeah, well, one thing you can do, I'll just say two quick things you can do, is that you can print out these reports. You can print out, like you can go to Human Rights Watch, you can go to Amnesty, you can go to UN OCHA, they have like detailed reports, and you can just take it with you everywhere. That's what I do. I did that on Capitol Hill, and you can highlight portions and show it to people. Now, unfortunately, there's going to be people who being like, none of those are credible sources. So then you're just like, well, I don't know what to do with you. But and then the other thing you can do is you can have like a saved folder of videos on your phone where you're showing testimonials of doctors who have literally been working there. Dr. Mimi Sayed, Dr. Mads Gilbert, Dr. Mark Perlmutter. These are all doctors who have testimonies that they saw no military activity, none. They literally lived in the hospital and had access to every single area. There was no military activity in these hospitals. And they didn't even treat militants. They're like, nobody even came to us like as a combatant who was injured So these are videos that you can save to your phone. But there's
we're actually interviewing Mimi Saeed. I think I'm doing it Sunday.
Incredible.
So yeah, they're having a meeting with the WHO about like what the evacuation of people, like the 2,000 cancer patient children from Gaza to Jordan, would even look like. We're not even going to get into that, but yeah, we're kind of getting close to like the last segment here at the stretch, and I was hoping to get into the connection between the veterinary world, because I know a lot of people who watch this podcast own pets and they're part of the BDS movement, and just kind of understanding how that works and what they can do to be more conscious, like pet owners, and what our audience can do in their own personal lives and how it connects to this greater system.
Let's skip to this question then. I'll ask you guys, have you ever in the United States taken an animal to a pet clinic, an emergency hospital, or bought pet food?
Yes.
Okay, Mark.
Yeah, I think I was panicking on the phone calling you up when my golden had an allergic reaction. I had to take her to that emergency clinic, and I was stressing you out over the reaction of her swelling of the face. Yeah, and of course we buy name brand foods, in bulk. So
yeah, so as a lot of people unfortunately don't know, because in BDS we talk a lot about what to boycott in terms of products for ourselves, but we don't recognize that if you have done any of those things for an animal in the United States, you are likely supporting brands and companies that are heavily invested in Israel. Because, for example, you start out by going to the health clinic just for vaccines. The vaccine companies, the big ones, Elanco, Merck Animal Health, Zoetis, they're all, BlackRock owns part of all of them. So the other thing is, if you go to the emergency hospital or even your clinic, so a lot of those, like the lion's share of those clinics and ER hospitals in the United States, Blue Pro Veterinary hospitals, VCAs, Banfields, those are all owned by Mars. And Mars has deep ties with Jerusalem Venture Partners, which was started by this guy, Margalit, who he started out in actually cybersecurity and AI and surveillance in Israel, like being really successful with startups in those sectors. And then he started Jerusalem Venture Partners and partnered with Mars on food tech. So Mars is partnered with them and owns like the majority of pet care. So not only is it when you take your animal and you get vaccinated or you take the ER, but then your veterinarian does lab work. And IDEX Laboratories, Antech, and Heska are all traceable back to either Mars or BlackRock.
And by the way, BlackRock owns shares in most of the weapons industries and the energy sector. Right. So I've always said that this war, this quote unquote war in Gaza, it's BlackRock's war. It's not even, they stand to benefit from most. Their fingers are in every aspect of this genocide.
Well, so yeah, I mean, they're a massive hedge fund that has that manages business ventures in literally every sector. So it's impossible to like boycott BlackRock if you're trying to like seek health for like yourself or your animal. It's impossible. So what to do then from your perspective in terms of like harm reduction or something like that?
Yeah, I just want to talk about the pet food companies real quick first, because a lot of people don't realize that the drugs and the pet food, so like everything from like antibiotics to ear medications, and the pet foods include things like Whiskas and Friskies and Purina and Iams and Eukanuba and Royal Canin and Beneful and like all these millions of brands that like if you took them off the shelves in Petco, there would be like nothing left. Those are all complicit, but that's the question I want to ask you guys. So like, Greg, with what you said, it's impossible to boycott all these things. What are the actions that we can take? Like, how can anyone who cares about One Health or has a pet or cares about animals or cares about their own life, like, what can we even do? What can we do about this?
Well, it's impossible to boycott completely. That's completely obvious. That's certain. So I don't know. I don't exist in the veterinary sector. I've recently become a multi-cat dad. They all have like disabilities. So going to the vet is like a normal thing now. But yeah, I'm not sure. I'm interested to learn if there's anything to be done with regards to that.
Mark, what do you think?
The only thing that I've been thinking about this for a long time now is I guess trying to empower small businesses as much as possible, because the BDS movement is connected to the support of small businesses. So that's always been my go-to, sermon for people who want to give the middle finger to this, corporate monopoly that's happening through BlackRock and Vanguard and State Street, is figure out ways to empower and patronize small businesses as much as you humanly possible.
Yeah, I think that's a good answer. I actually didn't even have that online, and that was why I really wanted to hone in to your listeners to think about, like, the reason that I wanted to say this in the beginning, but I think I got fuzzy on like where the beginning was, like when we were talking, to be honest. But I want your listeners to know that I wanted to give them a lot of this knowledge that I put in the outline, because with your own experience and background and life, you're going to come up with your own ideas on what to do about this. And everybody's going to have their own way of contributing. So Mark, that's a really good idea. But one of the most important things we need to do is spread this knowledge. People don't know this. People don't know this. They don't know. And the thing that I didn't even talk about in terms of the complicity of the veterinary field, we talked about Mars, Nestle, BlackRock, all the hospitals and diagnostic laboratories and pet food and even Tidy Cat's litter. We talked about all that. We didn't talk about the salaries of the veterinarians here. This is obviously a common denominator for all of us. If you were living and working in the United States and making money, which we do collectively as veterinarians, we probably make like about $16 billion a year-ish. That's a very back of the envelope calculation, but that's still a contribution to the government. We're caring for some of the most privileged animals on the planet. And some of that money, a significant amount, is going to provide weapons to people who are genociding other people. So people need to be aware of it.
Okay, so yes, can you draw a line from testing your cat's kidney to weapons? Because that's fuzzy for me personally.
Yeah, you can. So, for example, Antec Diagnostics. So when you go and test your cat's kidney, if that blood work is done in-house, it's like a little machine that's in the laboratory. A lot of those are Heska. There are other smaller companies too. Heska
for us, it's getting sent to a lab. So,
okay, if it's getting sent to a lab, it's either IDEX or Antec.
Okay,
those are the two big labs. IDEX has ties back to BlackRock, and Antec is owned by VCA, which is owned by Mars.
Okay,
which is owned by BlackRock.
No, what?
Well, they own shares.
Mars
they own
is.
Shares.
Yeah, I don't
they
know
own
if
shares.
Oh, they do.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
They own shares.
Okay,
yeah.
we'll fact check that. But yeah. Okay, so that goes into but I guess just because it's managed.
No, it says.
by...
Sorry, I just want to say that real quick. I just looked at that. BlackRock. It says BlackRock is not known to have a stake in Mars. Just for reference.
Okay.
Thanks. The parent company of Mars. You have to go up the chain because usually they have a parent company of a parent company.
But Mars is the parent. Mars is the biggest. One on that food chain.
We'll put it. So okay, and so you use these labs. They go in. They're managed by their assets. They're handled by an asset management firm, BlackRock, but that I guess in some people's mind, since BlackRock's in every sector, period, how does that directly tie into the military-industrial complex?
Well, that's a good like some people do make that argument is that
right. No,
like,
I'm
okay,
just no,
no,
putting
that's
forward the
okay.
counter
Yeah,
argument.
because people don't know what BlackRock is, because BlackRock is an investment firm. A lot of people, I think, have gotten confused and think it's like literally like a weapons manufacturer or like an umbrella owner of many weapons manufacturers. But in all reality, it's an investment firm that's worth $7 trillion. And some people are like, well, it's an investment firm, and yeah, it invests in these companies that profiteer off of war and genocide, but it's neutral because it's just an investment firm. But actually, no, like, because no investment firm is forced to invest in companies that are literally massacring innocent people in the hundreds of thousands or possibly even the millions. So that is the connection. So the pressure would be, and this would be a huge, obviously, like, ginormous, because it's a $7 trillion investment firm. The hope would be at some point that they would disengage from those investments. Now, is that realistic? Probably not. But the point is that there is a direct tie. Like if you are patronizing any brand or company that BlackRock invests in, you are helping them get richer, and they are happily profiting off of war and genocide.
Right. And I suppose off the top of your head, in order to make it less abstract, is there anything that you could directly tie to like the Tel Aviv tech sector, like any of these labs, any of these food companies, maybe like any of these like pet monitoring apps? That seems like something Israel would be involved in.
Oh yeah.
You know what? I don't have any. You're probably right on the pet monitoring apps, because there's a lot. I will look into that, Greg. I do know. I know that whatchamacallit, Nestle, which owns like a lot of the pet food companies that are not owned by Mars, has like a large share in OSIM, which is it completely owns OSIM, which is a large food manufacturer in Israel. But you're talking about like direct, like absolutely direct, like if I use this, that means it's a company that directly profits Israel. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, something like is basically Starbucks, because Starbucks doesn't fund Israel, but they do endorse illegal settlements in the West Bank by having Starbucks in those locations. Something like that, perhaps.
Well, like the Mars thing is like they literally built a research and development center in Israel.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's one. But the other thing is just like going back to human healthcare for a second, is that I went to an event by Nurses Against Genocide. There was a nurse who had been fired from her position at NYU Langone. You guys might have heard of her, Hassan Jabber. But so she's an obstetrics nurse who got an award for compassionate care. And in her acceptance speech of her award, she's Palestinian American. So she mentioned the mothers of Gaza, and she got fired within a week after getting this award for compassionate care. So anyway, this person was mapping out. Actually, I'll share. Can you put that thing on the screen, Mark, that I asked you to put before?
Yeah.
I went to this lecture where someone was mapping out the connections from NYU Langone Health. She was basically trying to figure out like what exact string had been pulled within that week to get her fired. And there were so many that she was like, I couldn't narrow it down. But NYU Langone Health. So basically, for the people who are just listening, this is it's like a spider web diagram. It starts off at the bottom with NYU Langone Health and NYU, and you see branches of a spider web leading out from them to a line of people. And that line of people in the middle, guys, is like those are all board members, trustees, overseers of NYU and NYU Langone Health. So you can see, I don't know if you can see my mouse, but the third one from the left is Lawrence Fink, who is the CEO of BlackRock.
Right. Yeah. I mean, he's definitely tied into NYU and like most universities in New York area.
Right. And then we see all these other ones. And a lot of people don't know that, Greg. A lot of people don't know that. So, and then we see these other ones, they're tied back to other things like the New York Stock Exchange and the Republican National Committee and all these like Hillel International. So all of these people are tied in. And by NYU, like NYU Langone Health, that's like a huge healthcare provider here.
Mm-hmm.
So this is, again, another demonstration of like how One Health is literally, it's not like a domino effect. It's literally like a tapestry where there's all these threads interwoven. And we're starting to see how like why the tapestry is so effed up is because so many of the threads connect to really bad things.
Yeah.
So in the final stretch then, because we try to end when we do these like educational podcasts on like a call to action, what can we do? Mark mentioned mom and pop shops, like not going to Petco, which is inherently problematic in the first place. But like what to do to support this idea of actually like One Health and to be a conscientious pet owner within the greater context of, you know, being anti-genocide and pro-environment and stuff like, and pro-small business as well.
Yes, right. So the most important thing is to not be silent. The most important thing is to own your leadership role in this movement, is to realize that you are not destined to be on the sidelines if you have any of this knowledge. And so talk to people, including your veterinarian, your dog walker, fellow pet owners, like they need to know this information. Whatever you do, don't be silent. Have these conversations publicly and get people to unite. Like we all need to come together on this. There's a lot of finger pointing right now on topics not related to healthcare. Just like a lot of people saying like, well, we wouldn't be in this situation if you had only done this or your people had done that or something. So like ignoring that, literally like staying calm, arming yourself with this knowledge, spreading awareness, getting people to unite. This is extremely important, and owning your leadership role. That's really important because people don't know this stuff. And I know you guys know this stuff. You're very tapped in. A lot of people don't know this stuff. Okay. Yeah. And there's so much that I want to say that like I didn't even get a chance to talk about. Okay. And then, so to do this and to keep learning about this, you could join Animal Healthcare Workers Against Genocide and participate in our actions. So there's two really important ones right now. One is we wrote a letter to the AVMA. The AVMA is the American Veterinary Medical Association. They're the leading veterinary medical association in the United States. And they have been silent about this. They spoke very quickly on Ukraine when, you know, I can't remember what exact date that was. But they spoke very quickly on Ukraine and how One Health meant that we're going to be supporting our Ukrainian siblings in healthcare. And they made a $200,000 donation as well from the AVMF, which is their medical, their charitable foundation, to our Ukrainian colleagues. They have done nothing on this. So we wrote a letter explaining how this is our duty to talk about this. And every single person can sign that letter. The link is in our link tree. If you go to our link tree, it's linktree/AHWAG. And it's the first link in our link tree. Everyone can sign this. And it doesn't matter even if you're a pet owner or not, because veterinary care is tied to everything. It's tied to, so if you have a pet, your mental and emotional health is invested in that pet, and veterinarians help make that bond possible. If you eat any sort of meat or dairy products, or if you're literally, I mean, a veterinarian oversaw that, made that possible to get to your table. If you live in this world, like if you have a backyard or you go to a park or you go hiking, or even if you honestly don't, there are animals in the environment spreading communicable diseases. The safety in our environments are made possible by veterinarians, as well as like the drug industry, like the research that goes into a lot of the pharmaceuticals that all of us take is also made possible by veterinarians. So every single person in this country has leverage over the American Veterinary Medical Association. Like they should be listening to every single one of us. It doesn't matter if you're an animal healthcare worker. It doesn't matter if you're even a pet owner or an animal owner. Everybody can go sign that letter. So please do that, because we need leadership to stand up to make it less scary for the people who care in our profession. Because I literally have friends who have gotten death threats for speaking up on this. And our organizations that are supposed to be leading us are completely silent. So that's one really important action. Another action is you can join us on Capitol Hill to tell our elected officials about this and to video document it and share it. And our next day that we're going to Capitol Hill is going to be February 19th. And that is the third link in our link tree. So, and that's next Wednesday. So we have meetings throughout the Senate. We're going with Doctors Against Genocide. And we are going to be talking about, actually our focus next week is going to be on some of the things that have happened this week. And like, everything's changing so fast, as I know you guys obviously are always on the pulse of. But the three things that we're talking about as of right now is we don't want any, obviously, forced displacement. Like this whole talk about like Trump strong arming Egypt and Jordan into accepting Palestinians and trying to force Palestinians to be ethnically cleansed. We're against that. We're obviously against the annexation of the West Bank. And we're obviously against the fact that Trump like basically advised Israel to break the ceasefire. So those are the things that we're bringing to our senators next week. But the point is that we're bringing it from a medical perspective. So we have all of these things that we tie into healthcare, and then we bring up our points about why it's important to not do or do certain things. So people can join us there. And you can come up with your own ideas. That's why I really wanted to arm people with this knowledge.
Yeah, we're going to put these links in the description. So guys, go ahead and show your support for this, get involved. And what I think what's so inspiring about what you're doing is that it illustrates the mosaic of this movement, how everybody within their own capacity and specialty is doing what they can, getting creative with it. You know, you forming AWAG, you know, people, veterans forming veterans organizations, whatever your specialty is, people are using that and weaponizing it against this injustice that's taking place across, you know, across the planet, and especially in the global South. But so we've been talking about like I guess that a lot of the technical aspects of this, but to kind of connect the audience with a very emotional like connection with Gaza and Palestine in regards to animals. I pulled a video about Khalid Nabhan, who, as many people know, may remember, he was the grandpa of Reem, the soul of my soul, who he died. He was slaughtered, and he died later on. So this is a video of him taking care of cats in Gaza, as a lot of people have seen on these videos, or people who haven't seen. The people of Gaza love their pets. They love animals. I have experienced that in the West Bank. When I was in the West Bank at age 18, I saw the care that Palestinians and the husbandry to their animals, how they're a part of the family. They don't look at them as just beast of burden or, you know, or vermin. They really do care about the land, and it just goes to show their indigenous nature. So this is Khalid, a video of that, and I just want to show that. Reminds me of my grandma on the farm. She would do that, bang the kettle, and all the cats would come. We had 20 cats on that farm. But yeah. Well, Mark.
Yeah, and this, I just want to say that this is, Mark, what you're exemplifying with that video is the fact that genocide affects the fact that, so animals are literally targeted in genocide to exacerbate the suffering of human beings. So some are actually purposefully targeted, and some are indirectly affected. So those cats that didn't have any food and they were all strays, those are indirectly affected. But then we also see like the purposeful targeting of, for example, farm animals. And we also see that in the Congo, the intentional poisoning and shooting of farm animals, both in the Congo and in Palestine, to exacerbate human suffering, because human beings need healthy animals to live and thrive and survive. And wild animals, farm animals, pet animal, companion animals, like you were showing, they're all tied into our mental, emotional, and physical health. And so targeting that in a genocide helps cut the ties and cut the cords and make it even harder to rebuild. And so that's part of why animal suffering is so important to fight in genocide.
Yeah. Absolutely. So where can we find you? So
at Instagram, we are Animal Wag. And our website is animalwag.org. And yeah, I think those are the main places. Our link tree is linktree/AHWAG, Animal Healthcare Workers Against Genocide. That stands for.
Yeah. So if you're watching on YouTube, we're pretty much. I talked to a contact I have at Google. We're pretty much done like growing on YouTube for the foreseeable future. We're like our videos aren't getting out, so I think we're going to be putting a more concerted effort into audio, like on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio. So we're going to be doing more like geared towards that. So I know if you follow a lot of similar channels, it's kind of like more free form, but I think we're going to start structuring episodes a little bit more and like have music and stuff like that. So we would definitely like you to come on again. And there's a lot of interesting things that you brought up that I would definitely want to focus more on, especially at the end, the psychological impact of animals in warfare and genocide, because that's something I like when I was studying medieval history in college. That was like a huge part of like siege warfare as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes sense. Yeah. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say it makes sense because it's kind of like on a very small scale. It's like a domestic abuser can target somebody's pet to create emotional distress and suffering for them. That's a direct tie to your mental and emotional health, your pet.
Yeah. So anyways, a lot more to unpack, and definitely want to like revisit this subject in the near future.
Yeah, I would like that too. Because I'm sorry, I had like a whole thought process of how it was gonna go, and I feel like it didn't go that way. But so I would love to come back and have some more discussions on how we could tighten it and make it helpful.
Yeah, no, I think
helpful.
This was great, and thank you so much for taking the time and coming on. And yeah, we'll definitely see you again soon. Thank you. And we'll post all your links in the description of this video here on YouTube. And then you can also get the links on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and iHeartRadio as well. Thanks, y'all, so much for listening. If you're a Patreon member, we're going to continue this conversation a little bit longer. And for the rest of y'all, we will see you tomorrow with Immortal Technique, talking about perhaps, the Kendrick Lamar halftime show and radical activism going forward under the new Trump administration. So hope to see you guys there, and have a good night. Cheers.